Hello and welcome to this third video in our lecture on the weaknesses of public key crypto systems. So in this lecture, we have been discussing the pros and cons of, on the one hand, symmetric approaches to cryptography and asymmetric or public key approaches. So in particular, both approaches are good at supporting and enforcing integrity checking on messages. In this video, we want to focus on the issue of non-repudiation. So one way to enforce integrity in a symmetric system is to use a MAC algorithm. So let's briefly review how a MAC algorithm works. Remember that it takes two inputs, namely the message M that you want to authenticate and then a shared private key K. And out of these two inputs, it will compute an authentication tag or message authentication code MAC. And so this is a way to both authenticate the sender and also verify the integrity of the message M. Of course, integrity could also be checked using public key crypto system, for example, a digital signature. But for now, let us focus on the symmetric approach, and let's take a concrete example. So let's say Alice is a client of Bob's, who's a stockbroker, and Alice wants to place an order for Bob to buy a large number of shares for her. So she's going to send a message, which is a shares order to Bob, and of course, she wants to authenticate herself to Bob. So Alice and Bob are going to share a private key. Let's call it K sub AB, since it's only known to Alice and Bob. And then she's going to use that key and a MAC algorithm to authenticate M by attaching a tag to her message, an authentication tag that she obtained using a MAC algorithm. So Bob received the order, can verify that it came from Alice, and because Bob is a busy guy, he doesn't place the order until several hours later in the day. And it turns out at the time that Bob places the order, the price of the shares is going up significantly. So Alice ends up paying a lot more money than she thought she would at the time she placed the order, or she sent the order to Bob. So what prevents Alice then from suing Bob and claiming in court that she never actually sent that order to Bob? Well, Bob has no way of proving to the court that Alice was the one who actually placed the order, because Bob, knowing the key, could have basically faked that order and claim it was coming from Alice. So you see the weakness again of a MAC algorithm is that because it uses a shared private key, it does not support the security goal of non-repudiation. So what would happen if instead Alice had used a digital signature, that is a public key approach? Then, because this approach uses a private key, namely the private key of Alice, there was no way that Alice could later on claim she never sent that order. In other words, public key approaches to this problem would solve the non-repudiation approach. Now, the problem, of course, is that as we discussed earlier, public key crypto systems are much, much slower than symmetric ones. So how is this problem solved in practice? Well, the digital signature approach actually works like this. the original message that Alice wants to authenticate is first hashed using a fast hash function that outputs a small fixed length hash code or message digest. And then this hash is actually encrypted using the private key of Alice. So Alice now has a message and a digital signature. So she's going to send both of these original message together with the signature to Bob, and Bob can now check that the message actually came from Alice because it will be able to hash the original message, get a hash code or message digest that it can then compare to the digital signature that it was able to decrypt using Alice's public key. So this mechanism works as well as a MAC algorithm in terms of authentication and check on integrity. And again, it has the advantage that it can also support non-repudiation since Alice was the only party that could have known her private key. Now, the downside, of course, of the digital signature approach is that it uses a slow, very slow public key crypto system. And so the way that this problem is avoided is, notice the input to the encryption algorithm, which is the slow part, is only a small fixed size hash code. And so what that means is, notice the message itself is not passed through the slow encryption algorithm. Only the message digest is. And so this message could be megabytes or gigabytes long. There was no slow encryption of it. The only encryption step is performed on a small fixed size hash code. So in practice, this is one way that digital signatures are implemented. And it's important to realize that, as always in cryptography, things are not as simple as they look like. So just remember that in digital signatures, the message is not encrypted. Instead, a message digest of it is encrypted. And this solves the problem of the low efficiency of public key crypto systems.